Good evening. My name is Sarah, and I want to thank you in advance for reviewing my fact debate video. The proposition for my fact debate is harsher penalties increases recidivism. Now, according to Pew Center on the States, on their webpage, State of Recidivism, the revolving door of America's prisons, last updated April 2011, they reported in 2008 that the incarceration levels had risen to a point where 1 in 100 American adults was behind bars. Although tougher sentencing was thought to have a deterrent effect, supporting evidence suggests the opposite. Today, I will be assessing my proposition by first defining my terms, then setting the limits of my argument, and lastly, I will discuss the major points in support of my proposition. So now that I've outlined my argument, I will start by defining the terms as they relate to my proposition. Before I stated that harsher penalties increase recidivism, let me clarify what penalties means in the context of my argument. According to Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, last updated January 27th, 2021, penalty is defined as the suffering in person, rights, or property that is annexed by law or judicial decision to the commission of a crime or public offense. Next, I should make clear what is meant by recidivism. According to Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, again, last updated January 27, 2021, recidivism is defined as a tendency to relapse into a previous condition or mode of behavior, especially relapse into criminal behavior. Now that all the pertinent terms have been clarified, let us discuss the limitations of what I mean when I use these words, specifically penalties and recidivism. For example, penalties will be discussed as judicial sentencing of an individual who's convicted of a crime, and recidivism will be discussed as committing another criminal act after the completion of a sentence term. Now that I've defined my terms and set my limits, I will move on to arguments in support of my proposition. First, longer prison terms increase the probability of recidivism. In an article titled Imprisonment and Reoffending from 2009, authors Nagin, Cullen, and Johnson quoted Ronald Akers in saying that consistent with social learning theory, it can be expected that a custodial sentence will intensify a commitment to a life in crime. And in the journal article, Criminal Law and Criminology, Recidivism and Time Served in Prison, authors Mayers, Cochran, Bales, and Beatty from 2016 wrote, "Scholars have emphasized that the greater reliance on incarceration can create a number of social harms. They affect ties to family and friends, mental and physical health, employment prospects, and the ability to access public housing." Cochran, Bales, and Beatty also quoted Donald Klimmer in the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology as saying, "Lengthier stays in prison may allow for greater acclimation to prison culture, and so greater likelihood of offending after release to society." Yet another reason that incarceration leads to a higher rate of reoffending is the labeling effect. As inmates become immersed in the prison subculture, they form a new perception of their self. Nagin, Cullen, and Johnson, authors of Imprisonment and Reoffending, also wrote, "Offenders who internalize a criminal identity thus would subsequently act in a way that was consistent with this self-conception." And the authors of Recidivism and Time Served in Prison 2016 cited a Bureau of Justice Statistics National Assessment of Recidivism Rates among prisoners released from 30 states in 2005. And they found that within 5 years of release, 77% of prisoners were rearrested for a felony or serious misdemeanor. Last, prisons have a criminogenic effect. I would argue that most of you would agree that our environment plays a crucial role in who we are and who we become. In that journal article, Imprisonment and Reoffending, the authors Nagin, Cullen, and Johnson wrote, although intended to prevent crime, this unique experience in social segregation is argued to have the unintended consequence of increasing exposure to crime-inducing influences and of decreasing exposure to pro-social influences. And in the article Recidivism and Time Served, 2016, the authors provided statistics based on time served in prison, noting that from 1 to 12 months, greater time served is associated with increased probability of recidivism, rising from 38% to a peak of 51% at 1 year. So now that I've presented my case, I will conclude my argument. Today I've discussed the definition of key terms in my proposition, the conditions of those terms, and the application in support of. Harsher penalties increase recidivism. If one is asked to believe that harsher penalties deter crime, you must ask yourselves, why are so many Americans spending time behind bars? And why are the vast majority serving time for reoffending? I urge you all to consider alternative rehabilitation for dealing with the criminal margin of our country's citizens, and make sure to vote for policy reform. Thank you.